What's up, YouTube family? Welcome to Discouraged to Willing Part 8, which is the end of the second segment out of our 3 here as part of this 12-week journey. In this video, we're going to be speaking about the whole concept of how self-reflection births courage and zooming into what that really requires, which definitely is shadow work. Yeah. Woo! Have you done shadow work? Do you know what shadow work is? If you do know what shadow work is, this video will still be helpful because we always need a refresh. And if you don't know what shadow work is, great. You are going to learn a lot of interesting things that are really going to help you on your path. And they're going to improve every facet of your life. Okay. So, what is shadow work is what we're going to cover briefly. We're going to cover prior to that, what is your shadow? Then we're going to look at the benefits of shadow work, and I'm going to give you some prompts to start that process. And throughout this entire video, we're also going to be speaking about how, what is this holy grail of doing this work? What is the point of it all? Why do self-reflection? Why face your fears so you can be courageous? Why do shadow work? This is all to attain the holy grail, right, of divine union. And divine union is an alchemical process that happens within, right? So you are for sure unifying the inner masculine and the feminine, the inner shadow and the light, right? To turn lead to gold, to be able to face life steadfast with a clear sense of who you truly are, not who the false self is. And then you are ready to enter life and to relate with life from a whole and embodied place, which opens up the capacity for you to actually have real, true, meaningful relationships, be it with your friends, be it with your partners, your relationships, and on a more primal level, actually the capacity to intimately connect with people, to feel comfortable to relate on the deepest physical level through the act of making love and sex, right? Because that's the most physical, if you want to visualize it, just visualize that with me right now. That's the most direct example of what we're talking about here. And the power of shadow work is so that you can release nervous system tension, be it through trauma, stuck emotions, whatever it might be, so that when people come into your field, they're not meeting a stress response. They're not meeting you through the veil of the traumas that you're carrying, consciously or unconsciously. They're able to see you, the beautiful, radiant you who's illuminating your own path from within, right? You're cultivating your intuition, you're cultivating your connection to your heart and your sense of play. And the reason why this video is here, not earlier in this 4, is because we need power to do this work. And by cultivating play, by cultivating a connection to your heart, by co-creating with your soul, right? You are putting energy and power into your power reserve so that when you go to face the more challenging aspects of this process of self-discovery, you have some resources. That's essentially it. So I want to invite you to just visualize something real quick. Imagine a tree, right? Let's say it's just an empty meadow. There's just one tree. And it's a sunny day. And you notice that the light cast upon the tree therefore casts a shadow, right? That's applicable wherever there is light. Where there is light, there is a shadow. Okay? That's the nature of duality. And by speaking about the shadow, as you may have gathered, I'm not demonizing the thing. Why would I demonize one aspect of creation? What is outside, right? We can see the shadow outside, but the whole point of shadow work is you then recognizing, if I'm seeing it outside, it exists within me. And so then I can learn what these seeds of shadowness are and then transmute them. So I don't have to project them. We're going to speak about what projection is. So I don't have to project them. And then I don't get lost in this illusion of how the problem's out there and there's nothing for me to do within. So really juicy. Essentially, the shadow is always there, right? We've got the personal collective, right? The personal unconscious, rather. We've got the collective unconscious. And both in the collective unconscious and the personal unconscious, there resides a shadow. So how it exists in the collective may be different, a different manifestation of how the shadow exists within you. However, they're both there. And so by examining how the shadow exists within us, we don't get lost in what's happening outside. And then we can choose a different path and we don't then get caught up by the default patterns. This is sovereignty, right? One layer of it at least. Okay, let's hop straight into it. So I want to briefly touch on now, what is the shadow? There are three main defining characteristics of our shadow self. And I will just say as well, we don't just have like one shadow. There are many different faces of the shadow. For example, the liar, the cheater, the perfectionist, right? These are all forms of shadow. The victim, the perpetrator, right? There are many different kinds, but as one person, it's not like we just have one shadow, because I'm pretty sure you don't just experience one emotion, right? So the shadow is part of our makeup, our personality that we have often suppressed consciously or unconsciously. Often because it's too uncomfortable or painful to acknowledge, or it is a direct contrast with the identity that we want to be seen as, right? Like, oh, no, I cannot be seen as like super victimized and afraid. No, my persona is like the shiny, confident boss babe, right? And so the shadow gets repressed. But the more you repress it, the bigger it gets. The shadow is the hidden part of our personality that is therefore becoming unconscious. And what that means is that it will leak out as a sort of default pattern that you're not consciously aware of. Like as it's happening, it's there, it's happening, it's sort of on autopilot. And maybe after you realize, oh, right, that was a shadow projection. That was me leaking my stuff onto this person or in this conversation or onto this situation. And actually, I can see now that that's not the case. So that's why from the repression, it becomes, or the suppression, it becomes unconscious. Kind of as if you're trying to turn around, and every time you turn around, your shadow is just like moving and you can't actually even see it. So you're like, oh my God, I don't have a shadow. Woo! And then your shadow's like, you don't have a shadow. What? The shadow is associated with the qualities that we deem as less appealing. The shadow is like oftentimes seen as really bad. Like, oh no, the shadow, kill it, kill the shadow. And yeah, just these bad, negative, dark, evil, unwanted, terrible, disgusting qualities, right? These are basically the shadows. So I have a quote here that I'm going to read out to you, and it'll appear on the screen. It goes like this. Quote, ironically, the term personality is derived from the Greek word for mask, persona, reflecting our tendency to confuse the masks we wear with our true selves, even long after the threats of early childhood have passed. End quote. Yeah. Oftentimes, what we carry as our so-called personal shadows have been passed down through the generations, have been given to us by the time and the place in which we are born and grow up in. Hence why it's a personal and collective unconscious and how they weave together. Right? It's like the image that comes to mind, which might be useful to explicate this, is like the collective unconscious is like the mycelial networks, and the personal unconscious is like the mushroom, right? They're all connected. So some examples of how the shadow can manifest behaviorally are through lying and cheating, right? Self-loathing, self-sabotage, forms of addiction, not even just with actual substances, but even an addiction to a belief, an addiction to being in a specific state, like an addiction to being the victim, an addiction unconsciously to always being in a fight response and always seeing like people trying to hurt you, so you fight back, right? An addiction to being the rescuer, right? Your self-worth is bound by how much you can so-called help, seemingly help people without actually looking at your own stuff, right? The drama triangle, it's a whole thing. I feel like I've touched on it before in a video, but I really feel like I need to shoot a whole 3 series about that. Really, really important. It can come through as hypocrisy, right? The double standard. Like, you can't be mean to me, but I'm going to be mean to you. And in me saying, you can't be mean to me, I'm being mean to you, right? I mean, the human condition is highly hypocritical. So again, compassion to all of these things, okay? Don't allow what I'm saying to subconsciously feed self-loathing. Not the point. We're illuminating the darkness, right? Bringing it into conscious light. Shadows can come through as depression, anxiety, and other mental health afflictions, right? And depression is in and of itself not a bad thing, right? Depression, deep rest. Sometimes we really need that time to just go within and process what has not been processed and experience this state of kind of overwhelm, right? The shadow will come in this regard if it's a perpetual state of depression, like if it's now being used, or and to say in a different way, there's a secondary gain for you resting in that depressed, anxious state. That gain being you can feed the victim, who then doesn't have to face the responsibilities of their life, which then validates their position of stuff just doesn't work out for me. It works out for everyone else, but not for me, right? Shadows can come through as obsessive behavior. And, you know, an example could be a form of OCD, which is a manifestation of trauma, right? Of course, there are other reasons why that can manifest, but for our purposes here, it's a form of trauma, right? Which leads to that obsessive behavior. Like, you just even feel that if you don't do that thing, you fear persecution, which is another shadow, the fear of persecution, the fear of rejection. Because the human condition, we have these kind of baseline fears, we have these core soul wounds, and then the shadows can kind of loom and linger around these things if they're not faced, right? If the light is not shone in these dark places, then the fears will just get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And so the point of this is not necessarily to just control or delete fear from the whole picture or control or delete the shadow. It's the shadow, like anything, is a tool through which you can actually discover who you truly are. The shadow is a tool to help you see what your limitations are, and therefore what you can do to change that, what you can do to choose a different path than what you've inherited. So the shadow shows you what's up. And the shadow is also a grounding force that allows you to see that we exist in the yin and the yang. We exist in a whole, capital W whole, which includes and is comprised of the black with the white dot, the white with the black dot. Even in the black, there's a white dot, like the black as the shadow, let's say. And even in the white, there's the black dot. So they're inseparable. Okay. So you can't just delete one half of creation. So that's why we learn to work with it, so we can engage in an alchemical process to transmute the shadows, harness the dang things, and then get them to be your allies, right? And of course, shadows can manifest as emotional instability. One thing that might go wrong that isn't how you wanted it to go can knock you off your feet, and it can spiral you into this huge self-loathing process, right? Or it feeds this like dwelling in the past, like obsessive thinking about how you could have done it or should have said that or should have gone there, or right? So whatever I'm labeling here, there are so many threads where all of them can go. The thing is, though, if we don't acknowledge or even refuse to acknowledge our shadows, we won't find freedom, right? Another way to say that is, if we don't face our fears, we won't be courageous. We won't be able to shift from being discouraged into willing. And so that, when it's voiced like this, we can see that the shadows may appear as enemies, but really they are allies to assist us in growing and evolving into our fullest potential. Amazing, right? That doesn't mean that we bypass and then just go like, oh yeah, they're helping me, cool, whatever, they can just exist somewhere. No, that's also not it, because then they'll fuck shit up. That's just what happens. They want to be looked at. Even though they're the shadows and they kind of dwelling back there, they want to be looked at. They're the parts of you that want love and acceptance so that they can transmute, right? It's like within family constellations, right? A key pillar of this modality is that everything in the system deserves to belong. It all has a right to belong. And as soon as something is excluded, separated, outcasted, exiled, deemed as not belonging, not worthy to belong, that seeds into generational trauma, right? Because when something is exiled, when something is deemed as you cannot belong, outcast, it's a big trauma for the entire system, because the entire system wants coherence. It wants harmonious group consciousness, right? It doesn't want fractured, severed limbs, one limb over here, one limb over here. No, the body wants the 2 arms, the 2 legs, the 5 fingers, the 5 toes. I mean, heck, if you have 6 fingers, good for you. 6 fingers, right? That belongs. So, right, there's a tendency for the thing to want to be whole in order for it to be complete. Just like the yin and the yang would not be complete without the yin or the yang. So it's the same thing that we're talking about here. So what we do when we engage in this self-reflection work and we actually get to know how we are navigating through this game of existence, this miracle of existence. Whoa. What is it? Earth? Life school? School planet? It's like that. We've come here to learn. So Connie Zweig puts it in her book, Meeting the Shadow, The Hidden Power of the Dark Side of Human Nature. Quote, "In order to protect its own control and sovereignty, the ego instinctively puts up a great resistance to the confrontation with the shadow. When it catches a glimpse of the shadow, the ego most often reacts with an attempt to eliminate it. Our will is mobilized and we decide, I just won't be that way anymore. Then comes the final shattering shock when we discover that, in part at least, this is impossible no matter how we try. The shadow represents energetically charged, autonomous patterns of feeling and behavior. Their energy cannot simply be stopped by an act of will. What is needed is rechanneling or transformation." End quote. The more a shadow is fed, the bigger it gets, because where attention goes, energy follows. Think about a looping thought or a pattern that has existed in your life. It can be simple. And let's say for you it's, let's say it's this thought that you fear commitment, right? And it's this story that you've been telling yourself. And maybe you've had lived experiences that have validated that stance of like, whoa, I really fear commitment. Like, no, I can't commit to this thing, like, because I fear commitment and I'm going to just drop out anyway, right? I can't do this study. I'm just going to drop out. Or I can't go into this relationship. Like, it won't work, right? Maybe these are words that you're consciously telling yourself, or maybe this is just a feeling. But notice, right? Notice how you reinforce that with thoughts, and notice how that belief then starts to take a form, like it is an object that is existing in the ecology of you. And in order then to dismantle this object, if it's grown so big, like just it's kind of just like looking at a stone and saying, move, be gone. You see, it's not that simple. I'm just imagining saying that to the stone. Anyway, that really entertained me. I love entertaining myself. Do you love entertaining yourself? I hope so. So, anyway, the stone aside, the point is that if you've constructed this belief over time by feeding it, reinforcing it, almost like confirmation biasing your way into calling more reasons to you to further justify this belief, or what has now become a belief, it needs work. The rechanneling, the transformation, the reframing, right, from that video where we talked about reframing and what was it? Tell me, what was it? Reframing and, oh my God, I'm having a blank of what we spoke about. Reframing and, hello, answer. Anyway, it's not coming. But go check out that video. I'm pretty sure this was embracing and reframing failure. Oh my God, all these videos are kind of somehow blurring into one. It's been a ride. But anyway, go find that video. Reframing, super useful. And that takes time, because it's like, if another way to visualize it is if the shadow that has grown big is like a huge ball of twisted yarn, and it's like, whoa, it's all like that. In order to disentangle that, that needs to move, and then, well, that's connected to there, and then this needs to move, and right? It's a process. So it's got to be dealt with like one step at a time. Through the self-reflection, through the meditation, through the therapeutic work, through family constellation sessions, right? So you can see the systemic pattern and you can pass that responsibility back so the system can take responsibility for its crap and be whole again, right? Many ways. We'll speak about a few starter tips a bit later. But really just to reinforce that, like, avoiding shadow work becomes really toxic for ourselves and for others. An example is to illustrate that is like, let's say a somatic response or manifestation of a shadow would be like a shaking nervous system, right? Like through the screen, I'm sure you can even feel like that's uncomfortable to even witness. So let's say the shadows that are unresolved are like that in the nervous system. And let's say someone walks into the room and it's just you there, and they're walking in like this, and then they go sit next to you and they're just like shaking, and they can barely look at you and they're just still shaking, right? That's extremely uncomfortable and that will affect you, right? And then they end up using your nervous system to process their own stuff. So you become a battery. And so that's what we do to others when we don't process our stuff. They become a so-called battery because we'll project our shit onto them, right? We'll wear these false masks and maybe they can see through them and they're just like, yo, you don't need to do that here. And then maybe they'll project their shit onto you. And then it's not me and you talking, it's my shit and your shit talking, right? There's no true connection there. There's no divine union there. So this also really challenges and hinders the capacity to be sovereign, because sovereign really means you have dismantled enough of the default programming that you're not running by them. You're able to access a degree of free will. And we could argue that, yeah, free will, it's not possible on this planet because we live in a physical plane and there are boundaries and limitations, and that's just not how this game works. And sure, we could say that, but you know, as above, so below. So here, free will, to some degree at least, can still exist. And that's the power of the shadow work, right? So you can actually navigate reality and relationships and expression and sex and creativity from an authentic place, not from a fear-based, self-shaming, shaming other, anxiety-ridden framework. Right? Because the ultimate freedom is certainly the divine union within, and particularly the capacity to experience divine union with the other. The capacity to create and to co-create shamelessly, with love, with soul. Divine union externally can only happen when divine union has happened internally. And maybe they happen in tandem, but the within also needs to, well, the without needs to also be mirrored by the within. Hence the necessity for the shadow work as well. Hence the necessity for the self-reflection, to face the shadows, to face the unknown, and to approach it with more compassion, with more of a commitment that you won't try to run away, that you will ask for assistance where you feel it's needed. Because a shadow could also be that I need to do it all alone. Otherwise I failed. Otherwise I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, right? So yeah, really, by not facing our shadows, we starve ourselves of the gift, the blessing to individuate. And what does that mean? Not a narcissistic form of like, it's only me and I'm the only one that matters. But what I'm saying is like, the heart isn't trying to be the liver. The heart is the heart, and the heart does the heart well so that the entire system can function properly. Just as the liver is not trying to be the gallbladder, and the gallbladder is not trying to be the pancreas, right? And, it's not that black and white. Of course, we're multi-dimensional, complex, beautiful beings, and we don't just have one job. But if you kind of zoom out a little bit, we have a unique essence that is unique to us. I am different than you, and I'm not going to try to be you. My job is to learn to do this well, to face my traumas, to face my shadows, to be able to alchemize them so that I can step into my power as my own co-creator, so that I can share my gifts with the world, co-create with the world, and live a life that is in alignment with my soul and my heart, right? Likewise for you. We want your gifts. We want you, the beautiful, unique you, not your programs, not your patternings that you inherited. Yes, you were born into them. It's all divinely orchestrated. We could say that before you came to this world, you agreed that this is where you would be born, in this family with these traumas. Of course, because in order for you to learn who you truly are, you need to go through the dark woods. You need to face this shit because they teach you lessons. It gives you the power that you need. Because if you've overcome that, you can face the world. And the challenges that come your way, you know how to deal with them. And that's also part of the individuation process. This is a nuanced conversation because, of course, there's no right or wrong way to start addressing this. And there's no right or wrong way necessarily to talk about what the shadow is, because that in and of itself is also entirely nuanced. And so know that what I share here is a part of the definition, let's say. And if it interests you, I fully invite you to do further research. Dive into some of Carl Jung's work so you get a greater understanding of the shadow. He's the one who really brought this to a common discourse. Well, a slightly common discourse. It's not super common, is it? I hope so. It's more common than previously. So yeah, this is really leading into more of a concise definition of what shadow work is. But as soon as I'm speaking about the shadow, I'm like speaking about the shadow work. But really the shadow work is the opportunity for that inner alchemy to happen. The opportunity for you to build a bridge between self and other, and a bridge that is sturdy and solid and beautiful, not a bridge that is rotting and weak and frail, right? And so shadow work is, quote, a deeply transformative and healing practice that invites us to confront and embrace the hidden aspects of ourselves, or what's called our shadow self, the parts we often choose to ignore, deny, or suppress. And as you might have sensed, this isn't necessarily an easy breezy walk through the park, hence why most people will actively resist doing this. I truly hope that this video is not a reason to feed those shadows and feed those fears more, but a beautiful illuminating gift that allows you to see the power and the potential that exists within you, that your shadows are implicitly helping you to access by facing them and going through that alchemical process. One of our ego's most beloved techniques to prevent shadow work is the use of projection, rationalization, and social masks. So And just a note on that, like the ego self is also not entirely bad. I'm not also demonizing the ego. I love egos. That is what gives us our unique flavors. Like without an ego, there would just be one kind of person and they would all look the same, and that's that, right? So a healthy ego is also extremely needed, right? But the shadow of the ego, right? It's super self-defensive. It doesn't want to change. It wants to be right. It wants to be the best, okay? So to prevent the ego from facing the parts of itself that are not the best, that are not fab, that's why it employs projection, rationalization, and social masks as some examples of avoidance. So projection is the act of projecting or ascribing onto others anything we bury within that we bury within that we don't necessarily want to face or haven't faced. And so we see that quality or those qualities outside of ourselves. We see it in others. A simple example, let's say you get really irritated when someone is being rude. And it's a good bet that part of you hasn't actually owned your own rudeness. This doesn't mean that the person being rude to you gets off scot-free because they're still being an asshole. However, if this rudeness, if your own tendencies towards being an asshole were addressed, or if that wasn't a main shadow for you, then someone else's shadow of being an asshole or being rude wouldn't bother you so much. That's where the shadow integration also comes in, where we're able to face like, yep, I have a shadow that is just super bitchy, super asshole, really bitey, right? And so then when I perceive someone being bitchy, bitey to me, if I haven't accepted my own tendency or my own shadow, that's going to really rile me up. Okay? If I've integrated it, and the integration means I know it, I see it as it is, and I'm able to feel it but not act upon it, or I'm able to harness the higher octave energy of what that bitiness is, right? The higher octave energy of that is direct, assertive, right? It could be standing up for yourself, being righteous, but in a positive way, a constructive way. Whereas bitey is maybe righteous in a destructive way, right? So if that's been integrated, then when someone's being bitey to you, you're able to maybe access that higher octave expression then and be like, hey, like I can see that you're upset right now. I don't appreciate the way that you're engaging with me. If you continue to engage with me like this, I'm out. I'm walking out. That's it. It doesn't then give you, if it was unintegrated, likely that fire would burn in and then you just throw bitiness right on back, right? What's another example? Let's say, I mean, I use this example a lot because I guess it's close to home, but the perfectionism. I've noticed for myself with that, is if I see maybe other people, I want it to be juicy so you really get the point here. Okay. The shadow of jealousy. So there are parts of me that, let's say, I haven't fully accepted the jealousy. And so then if someone is being, let's say, okay, it's not exactly one-to-one, but let's say I'm jealous of someone I perceive that they are cooler, more beautiful, more successful, they're living a cooler life, whatever it might be that I'm jealous of. If someone then might call me out on that jealousy, if I haven't accepted that jealousy, I will be like, whoa, no, I am not jealous. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, no, you're jealous. Right? Or not accepting the shadow of competitiveness. And so then you try to hide the aspects of you that are competing, that are competitive. The higher octave form of that competitiveness is striving for excellence. And then if you integrate the competitiveness, that can then help you to collaborate and lift others up, right? There are so many examples that we could talk about here, and I put myself on the spot, so I couldn't think of the most juiciest one for you. But may this be an invitation for you to think about what triggers you in other people. Because likely what triggers you in other people is a representation of your own shadow unintegrated. If you're triggered by someone else's vanity, most likely you haven't addressed your own vanity. If you're triggered by someone else's aggression, then likely you haven't addressed your own aggression. It doesn't mean that they don't take self-responsibility for their aggression. If they've directly hurt you, let it be known. However, the charge there is often accompanied by a way shower that is like, yo, you haven't addressed me. So notice your triggers. That's a huge one. We'll get more into that a little bit later. So generally this process of projecting onto others our own crap doesn't happen consciously, and we generally aren't aware of all of our projections. Like, we'll just feel so righteous, like that, yes, that is 100% happening out there. The evil is there. It's not here. It's their fault entirely. Got nothing to do with me, right? And this is the defense mechanism that the ego uses to defend its perceived self-identity. The perceived self-identity of like, I'm the good one. So that doesn't give any room for you to also not be the good one all the time. As Jung writes in Alchemical Studies, quote, "A man who is unconscious of himself acts in a blind, instinctive way, and is in addition fooled by all the illusions that arise when he sees everything that he is not conscious of in himself coming to meet him from outside as projections upon his neighbor." End quote. These projections distort reality, and they create a boundary between how we perceive ourselves and who we actually are. Another key pillar of family constellations, in order for the system to be whole again and to heal, that system also existing within you, is to acknowledge reality as it is. No wishful thinking, no magical thinking. And the acknowledging reality as it is means there's anger here. There is betrayal here. I feel this, I feel that. This is what is here. Not, oh, well, I shouldn't feel that, so I'm not going to voice it. It's like, well, that's what's alive. And so that's what needs to be witnessed, right? So projection. That's a big topic in and of itself. We're just touching on it here. Another way that the ego defends itself is rationalization. So this is justification of certain behaviors, patterns in certain situations, so that you stay in the way that the ego wants you to be received, right? Rationalizing your binge eating, rationalizing stealing from the supermarket, because, oh, the beasts that have destroyed small businesses, and like, yo, been there, right? I was quite righteous about that for a while, but it also didn't feel good. So that stopped. And yeah, right, just the justifying why that behavior can continue, rationalizing why it's not a big deal, like whatever it might be, right? And then social masks are the guises that we wear on a daily basis to fit in, to feel a sense of belonging, to not stand out, the masks to not be a cause of conflict, right? I've done this so much where I would sacrifice truth in order to maintain a sense of harmony, but that harmony wasn't actually real because I wasn't being honest. And so then true harmony requires truth. And maybe that harmony doesn't look objectively harmonious, but there can still be harmony because there's ease in the system, because it's not holding on to anything. It's not holding on to something unexpressed, right? So social masks, a massive ego defense layer. And these forms of projections, these rationalizations, these social masks, these ego masks, these are all things and patterns that also get passed down through the generations if they don't get addressed. If they do get addressed, thank you, ancestors, they don't get passed down. And, you know, compassion to that, we're really lucky to live in a time where there's so much more awareness of these things, so much more dialogue and discourse about the process of actual healing and, the capacity to live a whole and embodied life. So I'm sure they did the best that they could, right? We don't demonize them either. But we also must acknowledge that there are some intergenerational systemic problems and patterns that exist through us. And so if they're not broken, they'll continue down the generations. That's also where family constellations is incredible as a modality to work on these patterns and to be the full stop, not allowing them to continue further. So really, like, a good sign that there's some work to do is asking yourself, how able are you to face reality as it is without trying to overlay it with how you want it to be, or that's bad, it should be like this, or right, whatever it might be. Are you able to face reality as it is? Are you able to navigate fear when it comes into your life? Or does it shut you down? How calm and confident and clear are you when communicating, when expressing yourself? How able are you to show up without shame, without embarrassment, without numbness and dissociation when connecting intimately with others, in conversation, in making love, right? These are all forms of it. Not being calm in yourself, right? Not feeling home in oneself is a real indication that we haven't rectified and reconciled with these shadows. We haven't dealt with the tension in our nervous system, that tension being the unresolved shadows that are circling around a stuck emotion from our past or whatever it might be. In order to connect from the heart so that it's not just us illuminating the path from within, it's also us being able to open our hearts and therefore open the hearts and minds of others, and so our golden light can make it easier for them to access their golden light, right? We want as much as possible a 0 point, which means equanimity, which means that when triggers come, instead of defaulting to the shadow projection response, we can see it as it is and not react to it and not feed it. Be the full stop in that moment where that trigger is coming. I'm feeling very agitated by their agitation and I'm about to yell at them, but I know how that goes. I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to take 5 minutes out and then we're going to continue this conversation. That's shadow work. Shadow work is also getting to know what your shadows are. And later on in the video, I'm going to show you and tell you a few of those really valuable prompts to start to get to know how the shadows are for you. For some encouragement, here are some benefits of doing this work, of doing the shadow work and the integration. So for starters, when properly channeled, the shadow self has traits that you can use to further your own personal development, as I've said. You can use the shadows as the tool for your own evolution and growth, for your own path of cultivating the connection with your heart, because that's required in order to expand your love to also include the shadows, right? Because we don't want exclusion. That's a disruptor for the system. So here's some of the benefits of actually doing shadow work and integrating your shadows in a productive way, going through that alchemical process. Enhanced creativity, 100%. Clearer intuition. Enhanced problem-solving capacities, because where there's greater creativity, there's greater problem-solving capacities. And if you've got issues that come into your life, which you do and you will, that's the nature of life, if you've got better problem-solving capacities, you're in a good way. Increased resilience, totally. I mean, you build resilience just by doing shadow work. Greater self-esteem, right? Because you have resolved the parts of you that are trying to hide, that are afraid to be authentic, that are feeling shameful about aspects of self. If you've been able to accept your own reality as it is and work with that, for sure, you're increasing your self-esteem. You'll get greater physical health, because a lot of the times these shadows, they exist as physical afflictions if undealt with, right? So much stuck energy can manifest physically. And so if you resolve that, you are freeing up your system. You are relaxing your nervous system. You're avoiding burnout. You're avoiding excessive emotional charge, which affects your organs, right? Holistic, right? Whole system. It massively improves your relationships. Not only the relationships with the other, but the relationship with self, the relationship with your work, the relationship with challenges, the relationship with non-human beings, right? The relationship with your soul, all of that, which then leads to divine union and your capacity to unify with the parts of you and then with the other. And there is your key for co-creation. As I've said, the relaxed nervous system, right? And the relaxed nervous system assists you in connecting creatively, intimately, honestly, without fear of polluting, right? The relationship, without fear of polluting the potential, the opportunity, right? Because you've dealt with that. You've dealt with the shadows of self-sabotage, or at least you're able to stop them in their tracks a little better. And you get a clearer perception of self, right? You're not pretending that you don't have shadows, that you don't have parts of you that are less desirable than other parts. You see them, you accept them, so they don't leak out unconsciously. And then there's more peace with that because it's truth. And then you can relax in the truth. I got another quote here from Carl Jung. It goes like this. Quote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." End quote. And just remember that these two halves right, of the light and the shadow, they aren't mutually exclusive. They coexist together. They are part of the whole, right? The yin and the yang. It's the whole. They are one and this. They are one of the same. They are one and the same, right? And so when we acknowledge that reality as it is, we recognize the interdependence of these energies, their interrelatedness, and then therefore that there's not one without the other. There is no true light without the shadows. Permission slip to acknowledge that, to live that, which doesn't give you permission to go out there and create havoc in the world or within your own self. No, that's not what I'm saying. It's recognizing that in order to attain the holy grail, the light of your soul, divine union, the shadows are the gatekeepers on the way that give you and test you to build the skills that you need to be truly able to hold your light. How's that all landing? Good job for making it this far. We're almost there. What I want to bring through now are 20 shadow work prompts. These are from Gabrielle Mastronado, so shout out to her. These prompts will facilitate your exploration of your shadow self, and may you approach these questions with as much self-compassion, curiosity, and open-mindedness as possible. Maintain equanimity as best as you can. Don't place judgments upon what you discover, right? Just let it come through. So these prompts will be on the screen, and if any resonate, pause the video, write them down. These questions are going to be part of the aligned action for this week, so either way, you'll probably be returning to this space. So let's go. The first prompt is, what emotions or situations do I tend to avoid or suppress? Right? What are my most significant fears, and how do they impact my life? In what ways do I self-sabotage or hold myself back? What qualities do I admire in others that I feel I lack? What triggers me, and why do these situations provoke a strong reaction? What childhood experiences or traumas might still be affecting me today? How do my relationships with others reflect the relationship I have with myself? What negative patterns or beliefs do I carry about myself, others, or the world? How do I cope with stress or emotional pain? And are these coping mechanisms healthy? What aspects of myself do I find challenging to accept or embrace? In what ways do I seek validation, approval, or love from others? And by extension to that, when you do seek that validation, the approval or love from others, do you sacrifice the truth to do that? Do you deny parts of yourself to do that? Hide parts of yourself? How do I deal with anger, And do I express it in a healthy way? A constructive way, right? What are my core values? And do my actions and choices align with them? It's a big question. You could spend 3 months just on that question. What masks do I wear in different situations or relationships? Are there any recurring themes or patterns in my dreams or nightmares? How does my inner critic show up, and what messages does it send me? Right? What's your inner critic saying to you? In what ways do I engage in self-care, and are there any areas where I neglect my own well-being? What are my boundaries, and how well do I enforce them in my relationships? How do I handle conflict, and is it in a healthy and constructive way? Or is it avoidant? Or is it aggressive? Or is it passive-aggressive, right? Many ways that could go. What lessons can I learn from my shadows, and how can I integrate these insights into my life? So, lots of gold in those questions. And you could really spend, pages on just one of those. So if you do go through these questions, of which you will be doing at least 5 if you do the aligned action, then feel free to bring those answers to a trusted friend, right? Just to talk about it, not making them a therapist, but, right? If you feel that that's going to be useful for you, for sure you can go to a therapist. You can bring it to a session. You can bring it to a family constellation session, right? And maybe even a support group. And this can really help you on your self-discovery journey, which will birth courage. Okay, so your aligned action is to pick at least 5 of those 20 prompts and answer them in as much detail as you can, giving yourself at least 30 minutes to do those 5 prompts. So really, this is like bare minimum. If you're like, Sophie, I'm going to do all 20 and I'm going to take 3 hours to do it, I'll be like, go you. Yeah. Also, if that's not what you're into, or that's not what you're available for, or that's not what time permits, whatever it is, bare minimum, pick 5. Maybe even pick the ones that you really like. Oh, I don't want to pick that one. Pick that one, okay? Because that's showing you that there is charge around that, which is a fantastic indicator of where there are shadows. They may not feel like they want to be seen, but actually they do. So go that way, right? If you see the fear, the trigger, the shadow as the gatekeeper, well, you do want to move towards that because you want to get to the next level, right? So go you. Enjoy doing that. It's a beautiful gift that you're giving yourself and others, right? Because you doing this makes it easier for other people to engage in this work. And what a gift that is for this entire planet. So power forward with that. And that's this video. Done and dusted. Good job. This next phase that we're going to be entering into is more about resolving the discouragement and realizing willingness, but particularly what I'm really looking forward to with the final 4 is it's more about as well the reclaiming the willingness so you can realize your creative genius. And as I alluded to a few videos ago, I planted this seed that in the next 4 videos, the aligned actions are going to be centered around a sort of month-long passion project, so to speak. And when I say the words creative genius, don't let that limit you to think that, oh, I have to be a painter or a writer for that. No, you are born of creative energy. You exist in creation, which is constantly creating. So your creative genius is another way of saying your unique essence, right? Your soul fire, your creative spirit. And so your creative genius is boundless. Doesn't matter what medium it is. So get super excited for that. You don't need to know what it is. I will guide you over the next four weeks to prompt you on what to focus on for that passion project. And the reason why we're containing it within 4 weeks is so that you can prove to yourself, to your psyche, to the shadows, that here's a start, here's an end, here's a little project, and I've completed it. Under promising, over delivering as well. Okay. So look forward to that. Stay tuned for that. That'll be coming round shortly in the next week. And what else do I want to tell you? I think that's it. That's it in terms of updates. Oh, so exciting. Okay. Thank you for being here. Thank you for journeying with me through this process. It's been powerful so far. Let me know in the comments if you have been watching all the videos of Discouraged to Willing and if you're making it through. Let me know how this is resonating for you. If you like what's happening here, hit the thumbs up for me, subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell. You can go through the description and there are some ways that you can connect with me, work one-to-one with me. DM me on Instagram. Let's talk about a family constellation session for you if you want to address some systemic issues in your life that you want to disentangle from, to be more sovereign, to be more willing, to be more courageous, right? So a lot of options there. In the meantime, I wish you well. Enjoy this aligned action. Go deep. Give yourself this gift. And I'll see you in the next one.